Welcome to Games from Folktales, a podcast that mixes historical trivia and tabletop role-playing settings. I'm your host, Timothy Ferguson. Today, Ptolemaic survivals. In the dying days of her reign, Cleopatra VII Philopator made preparations to survive the Roman invasion. In our world, these came to nothing. Cleopatra entombed herself alive and took poison in wine, by smuggling an aspin in a bucket of figs, or by biting her arm and then smearing a fatal unguent on the wound. This was not, however, her main scheme. This wasn't even her fallback plan. In mythic Europe, even 1,000 years later, the traces of her actions are the seeds for stories. Cleopatra was a priestess of Isis, a goddess able, so stories say, of bringing people back from the dead. She was given time to prepare the corpse of her lover, Mark Antony, and her own corpse was treated with respect by Octavian, so it's possible that either one or both of these figures has, or will, re-emerge from the magic realm as incarnate spirits. In Lands of the Nile, we called these creatures Akhu, and mentioned the chance that these are the youngest creatures of that type, and Antony, uniquely, is culturally Roman, which may assist an order descended from a Latin priesthood. Cleopatra was, according to non-Roman sources, a clever sorceress who commanded the greatest storehouse of treasure in the world. She had the largest library of books, the greatest concentration of engineers, and a stockpile of magic items. How might she have survived, and what might that mean? The Roman authors, least controversially, have Cleopatra attempt to flee Egypt. She has part of her fleet dragged to the Red Sea, intending to take treasure and soldiers, then carve out a kingdom in India. Her neighbours, the Nabateans, assiduously burned every ship as it arrived, or so they said. Similarly, after the fall of his mother's kingdom, her son Caesarion fled the country by heading to Berenice, a Red Sea port, intending to take ship for India. His tutor instead tricked him into returning to Alexandria and capture by Octavian. Either of these attempts could actually have succeeded. The Nabateans were a mercantile people with no love for Rome, a large enough bribe, and they may have allowed some ships through. Octavian had never seen Cleopatra or Caesarion. How difficult would it have been to send a substitute to die in place of the sovereigns? If Cleopatra got away by sea, she could have gone virtually anywhere. Her people had already travelled as far as India as traders. An island kingdom of Helleno-Egyptian sorcerers is possible. She might also have travelled down the Nile, the embodiment of her goddess, and entered into Orangia, the mysterious kingdom from which slaves and gold come to the coast. After the loss of the Red Sea fleet, the Romans were concerned she might head for Spain. It had been a fractious province for some time. She might have continued west to the Canary Islands, or to Antilia, there to found a kingdom that has avoided Europeans until now. At least, they've publicly avoided Europeans. They may have spies throughout Africa, some human, but perhaps some spirits or fairies, like the headless priests of Isis from Philae. In Cleopatra's story, the two greatest libraries in the world are destroyed. The Great Library of Alexandria burns, and Mark Antony then replenishes it by giving the contents of the Library of Pergamon to Cleopatra as a gift. These disappear from history. Magi have looked for them, of course they have, but they've had an amazing lack of success. As a plot hook, many games have had a Virditus Magus make a submersible and attempt to recover inscriptions on the stones said to have slid into the Bay of Alexandria. Perhaps the lack of success is a sign that the best of these items were hidden and then secreted out of the country. Cleopatra commanded her city not to rise against the Romans, so her networks survived the invasion intact. The Alexandrian resistance could have worked for years to save her kingdom's treasures, then impersonate merchants or caravans of slaves, and flee to a new home, distant from the empire. As a lover of the Foundation novels and a librarian, the idea that there might be a surviving great library sending agents into the world is particularly appealing. Even if Cleopatra did not survive, there are a few missing Ptolemies who could be the ancestors of the civilization's leaders. Cleopatra had 4 children. Caesarion, son of Julius, likely died at the hands of his adoptive brother, but he may have escaped. Cleopatra had fraternal twins with Mark Antony, called Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene. Then another son, Ptolemy Philadelphus. The younger Cleopatra was taken to Rome and raised by Octavia, the sister to Octavian, until she was married to Juba II. He was also educated in Rome as a client king for the Numidians. Their court had a great library, Isis worship, and a group of mystical scholars about it. It's one obvious birthplace for a cult of Egyptian-inspired Roman magicians. Although, strangely, it does not appear in any of the order's histories so far described in the books. After the senior Cleopatra poisoned herself, Octavian called the Psylli to try and save her. They were a Berber tribe that were immune to snake bites and could draw the poison out of bites to restore the recently dead to life. Little else is mentioned about them in the Roman sources, with the exception of the point that they used serpents in paternity tests, deliberately ensuring their babies were bitten by snakes, because children who were true Psylli would be immune. There's no known link between the king of the Numidians, the Psylli, and the Messali princess who sent Trionoma to Bonosagus, but there's a hook there for sagas that want it. The younger boys simply vanish from history. One writer records that they were spared by Augustus as a wedding gift to their sister, but that seems oddly sentimental and vaguely bizarre. Either or both might have vanished away to another civilization to continue the line of Alexander. Lands of the Nile has a great deal of information about ancient Egyptian magical practices and military equipment. The use of a pocket civilization allows these to be used not only by the returning dead, which occurs in Lands of the Nile, but by a mortal culture. This helps sagas by providing alternative theming to stories like the Mongol invasion, the quest for Prester John, the discovery of the Americas, the addition of a new house to the order, or the development of a magical homeland.